I have to tell you, I don't know what to say when you welcome me like that, but thank you. From my perspective, I was just doing my job, and for you to pay that kind of tribute to me is humbling, and I thank you. I can't watch the films of 9/11. It's too upsetting to me for a lot of reasons. There was 2,595 innocent people who died in those two buildings. There's another 125 that died at the Pentagon. There were 266 people who died on those airplanes. All innocent except for the terrorists. But what you may not have known was that there were 343 of them were firemen. 23 were policemen. Since that time, we've deployed almost 2 million people into combat. 4,600 people have died in Afghanistan and Iraq. You may ask yourself, who are these people who run into burning buildings for people they don't even know? Who are the people who stand up and say no to terrorists? Where do they come from? What kind of people are they? A few weeks ago, you paid tribute to a sailor that was lost at sea. And the sailors came to perform the memorial service, and you honored them. But what was more remarkable was that they sent a letter back and said, "Thank you for the hospitality, for the kindness, for the way you treated us and welcomed us." And I don't know about you, but the first question I asked when I heard that was, why did they send that letter? Why did they say it that way? And the more I thought about it, the more I knew, because many churches do not know what to do with military members or firemen or policemen. When I was growing up, I was taught that it was in Congress for a person to claim to be a Christian and yet be in the military. It was in Congress for a person to be a Christian and be a policeman. And the reasoning was, how can you love your enemy and yet go to war and kill them? How can you turn the other cheek and yet, as a policeman, say, I may render violence to you to stop you? And as a result, there are many churches today who look at military people and policemen, sometimes firemen, with a little bit of disdain because they think you're a little bit blooded and you're unclean because of the job you do. And that's the reason they sent that letter, because many churches do not treat them with that kind of kindness and respect. I've been witness to that. Maybe it's because people don't know what to say. Maybe it's because they feel uncomfortable. I don't know why, but I do know it's prevalent in many churches today. When I was one day I was watching television, and I was watching a program called Bully Beatdown. I don't know if you ever watched that. It's one of those cult films. And Sandy walked in. She said, "What are you watching?" I said, "Bully Beatdown." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because when I was a young boy, I was small, and I was a target of the bullies. And I used to beg for somebody to come and stop them, and nobody did. And I learned to fight the bullies. And I was the kind of guy that not only fight the bully, but I would stand between the bully and somebody else. Most often, I got beat up. A lot. But for whatever reason, I would fight. And I was always in conflict in my mind because The church was saying you shouldn't do these things. You should turn the other cheek. You shouldn't fight. And yet I thought, but who's going to stop these people? And in my heart, I felt like I was doing the right thing. But I was conflicted because other people were saying, oh no, you're bad because you're fighting. And I struggled with that. After 9/11, I was one of the first people to be deployed. I remember calling Sandy and said, I'm going to war. She said, oh no, you're not. I said, yeah, I am. And I could feel the angst in her heart. And while I was trying to be brave, I was worried. As we got ready that morning to leave, it was 4:30, we were in our building. I didn't know it at the time, but they were afraid that we weren't going to come back because all the stories we were hearing about anthrax and smallpox and all these wicked weapons, they were going to be released on us. And they actually thought we weren't coming back. And as we all sort of were in this room and the commanding officer was talking, he said, I don't know what to say. But my grandmother told me, when you don't know what to say, pray. These were all soldiers. We call them warriors. And you think, warriors pray? Yeah, we pray a lot. I got on the bus, 4:30, and I was looking at my troops, and I was trying to think of something to say. No words would come. But I looked at each one of their eyes, and we all knew what we were thinking. A word not needed to be said. As we drove off, we looked out the window, and the street was lined with all of our fellow comrades, and they were sending us off, saluting. When I got to the theater, our host nation was conflicted. And matter of fact, many of them had hatred in their eyes, even though because we were there, they didn't like Americans. They tried to ambush me and my team twice. And out of self-defense, I got to a place where I had to believe that if they were Arab or they were Muslim, they were my enemy. Not because I had anything against them, but it was a matter of survival. I didn't know what else to do. After my rotation, I came back home. My commanding officer said, Jim, you've done what nobody else could have done. You took this system to war. You've done well. You've saved lives. And go home. Be with Sandy. So I came home. And I went to a convenience store. Not before I saw Sandy, but I went to a convenience store. I went to this convenience store. And when I walked in the back corner, I saw a lot of commotion. And I looked. And there were these three guys, skinhead type. And they had cornered a girl, looked to be in her teens. And she was wearing a hijab. And they were terrorizing her. Just a few hours before, I would have regarded her as a potential enemy. But before I knew what I was doing, I was walking in and standing between her and those three bullies. And I told them, I said, you guys get out of here. And they responded, well, you don't know who she is. And I said, I know who she is. Now you leave, and you leave now. Apparently, I spoke with enough authority that they left. I was glad because they were bigger than me and I knew it was going to hurt. I turned around and spoke to the girl and I said, "Are you okay?" And she was so terrified she couldn't speak. And I tried to comfort her and I said, not everybody in America is like that. But listen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to walk you to your car. I'm going to make sure that you're safe. They won't hurt you. I promise you they won't hurt you. So I walked her to the car. And I said, are you going to be able to drive? And she nodded her head. And I said, okay, you be safe. And she drove off. And I went to my car. And I sat in and I closed the door. And I started crying. Because I didn't understand what was happening to me. Just a few hours ago, she was my enemy. And here I am standing in front of these bullies, defending her. And I couldn't understand. I have not heard God's voice many times. Actually, only twice. But the voice I heard was, "Jim, you did what I created you to do. I called you to be a defender. I called you to be a protector. I called you to stand up against injustice, wherever it is. I created you that way. And you did what I called you to do." It's not about race, creed, color, religion. It's about injustice. Our military people today are standing against injustice. Are standing against people who want to hurt us, who want to terrorize us, who want to make things the way they want to make them. Not everybody's like that, but these fanatics are. Our policemen stand on the line for us between chaos and peace. And sometimes it's a very fine line. But they're called to do the same thing, to stand up against injustice. Our firemen are called to lay their lives on the line to rescue us, to protect us. And I am certain that it's because God created them that way. In a time where things get real fuzzy, people ask me, "So how do you do what you do?" And rather than tell them this long story, I just tell them, "Well, I have Don Quixote syndrome. I think I'm supposed to defend the weak, rescue the fair damsel, and slay the fiery dragon." That seems to satisfy them. But what it really means is God created me to be a warrior. All throughout the Bible, you see that it was warriors that stood up. David was celebrated by God. He said, "You have God's own heart." These same warriors we talk about are the same warriors that defend other people. The same warriors who pick up a child and hold it and cradle it. The same warriors who have compassion on the people who are suffering because their land is in war. They go out and they gather food and clothing from you and they give it to these children and these families. And you say, how can that be? Here they are, valiant warriors, and yet they're doing all these things. And that's the heart of a warrior. If you've ever studied anything about the samurai were fierce warriors. But they were also philosophers, artists, poets, and loving family people. In order to do the job we do, you have to have that balance, or you can't survive. If you don't understand peace and love, how can you defend it? I feel very fortunate to have been chosen to do that. Jesus said, greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for another. I don't really want to do that, but I will. When I was growing up, Matthew 5, verse 3 used to really bother me. It says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I really didn't like that verse. Because it said, be a wimp. And I thought, everything inside me says, how can I do that? And then I began to study what that word meek really means. It comes from a Greek word, preos. Preos was a word that was used to train a horse for war. And what they would do is they'd take that horse and they'd push it and they'd shout at it and they'd do all kinds of things that a horse might encounter in that kind of combat. And when that horse became steady, reliable, dependable, and faithful in those circumstances, they said he was preos. The military people, the policemen, firemen, who lay their lives on the line for all of us, they are dependable. They are reliable. They're steady. And they're faithful. They will be there when we need them to stand up against injustice, against chaos, against disaster. They will be there in a time of need. After I came back from my first deployment, I was back at Scott Air Force Base, and I got a phone call from Sandy Ray at about 10:30 at night. She never called that late because she knew I went to sleep early because I had to get up early. And she said, somebody's trying to break into the house. And I said, okay, you call 911 and then get back on the phone with me. And in just a few minutes, she said, the police are here. And she said, outside of the door was a voice that said, Sandy, it's me, Jason. Jason Beto is a police officer. Many of you know him. And he's the one that heard the call. When she told me who it was, I cried. Faithful, dependable, reliable. I just did my duty. But I was honored to do it. I can't take claim for what God gave me. But all I can do is honor it and perform it to the best of my ability. When you see a fireman, a policeman, or military people, and you go up and you say thank you, trust me, it means a lot. The times you sent care packages to me when I was overseas, sometimes you'd send me cookies. I think there was some demonic person who took those boxes and just shook them because there wasn't a whole cookie in the lot. They were just crumbs. And we'd take that box of crumbs and pour it out on a plate. Say, hey guys, we got some crumbs. And boy, everybody come in and grab a handful. The crumbs ate just great. All those mean a lot. Anytime you send something, you may send it to me, but they're always shared with everybody else. All those things that you did for me and many other people, in their behalf, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you for your support, your kindness, and your recognition of not only the job that we do, but the fact that you recognize that God created us and called us for a special duty. I want to thank you for taking care of our families while we're away. Let me tell you, that does not go unnoticed. Many of you would call Sandy when I was away. Sandy's a very strong person. And you say, is there anything we can do? And Sandy said, no, I've got everything in control. And mostly she does. But I know that it meant something to her that you did that. And it meant an awful lot to me. I want to thank you for surrounding me and all the others, whether they be military people, policemen, and firemen, and being there for them. Because when you do that, you honor the calling that God gave us. I also want to thank you for the cards and letters and goodies you sent me. But mostly I want to thank you for being there and welcome me back home when I came. It's truly a privilege to be here. I thank you for what you've done. And I want to thank you for your citizenship, because without your support, we can't do the job that we're called to do. I've often wondered what my final words would say in this little speech. I can't think of a good one except to say thank you, thank God for your love, thank God for your support. And may God bless you, God bless America.